What if everyday social activities that you totally took for granted were impossible for you to do? I'm going to give you a few examples. Let's say you're invited to a work interview and you really need this job. You need the money. And you've prepared what to say, and the interviewer asks you, "Tell me a little bit about yourself." And you want to answer, but you notice your heart starts racing and you think you're going to have a heart attack, and you try to answer and you don't manage, you're silent. Imagine you're sitting in university and a cute girl comes and sits next to you and says, "Hello, what's your name?" And you would love to be her friend, you want to answer. You open your mouth and you notice beads of sweat appearing on your forehead and a blush spreading over your face. You open your mouth and the words don't come out. You feel like a fool. Let me take you to a kindergarten in Beijing. And there's so much noise. There are children laughing, chatting, talking, crying. And there at the back is Lan. 5-year-old Lan is frozen. She can't move, she can't talk. She is unable to laugh or smile or cry. And she stays there until her teacher comes and takes her by the hand and puts her in her seat, but she remains in her seat silent until the end of kindergarten, talking to no one, engaging in nothing. Now, let's take a look at Lan, that same day in the afternoon. She's at home, screeching with joy, playing with her sibling. She is full of life and sound and movement, chatting non-stop, a happy, boisterous little girl. Two completely different people. What on earth is going on here? Why couldn't Lan talk in kindergarten? Why couldn't you say hello to that cute girl in university? For most of us, talking, answering, asking is as natural as breathing. Somebody stops us in the street and says, "What's the time?" We'll look at our watch and we'll say 2:30. Or we need to buy a train ticket and we go to the teller and we say, "Guangzhou to Shenzhen, please." No problem. But for someone suffering from the social anxiety disorder, selective mutism, talking is difficult. In fact, talking can be impossible. The pattern usually is that at home, people can talk. But when they're outside their comfort zone, they are silent. You can think of it as a phobia. People with selective mutism, when they're at their home, in their comfort zone, with their nuclear family, they can talk. But when they go out to work, school, the supermarket, then they cannot say a word. So, you might say to me, "Well, selective mutism, what's the big deal?" I think if you come with me to meet Ming, you'll understand what a big deal it can be. Ming is a 25-year-old young man, and he lives with his sister and parents, and they are good, hard-working people. From really early on, Ming was very socially anxious. He would hide behind his mum's legs when they met people in the street, and he never, ever spoke to strangers or teachers. But when he was young, he had friends, and he played with his sisters, and he chatted with his friends. And as he grew older, the selective mutism spread, and it cast a gloomy shadow over his entire life. And when he was about 13, he stopped talking to friends. By 15, he wasn't talking to his family. And currently, he talks to no one. He stopped going to school at the age of 16 because it was just too scary. So Ming is a young man who has such abilities. He's a talented artist, but he can't go to university, get a job, or make friends. Ming is bursting with potential, and he's trapped by his selective mutism. Well, how could it be that Ming's selective mutism went undetected for so many years? Let me explain to you how this could happen. Let's say you are the teacher in Ming's first grade class many years ago. And it's a rowdy class, and there are poorly behaved children there, and there's running and shouting, and that little boy in the corner, he's about to hit his neighbor. And then you have Ming, who's sitting quietly, bothering nobody, so well behaved, so self-disciplined. Truthfully, if you were that teacher, who would you deal with first? Would you first go and try and stop that little boy hitting his neighbor? Or would you go and see why Ming is so quiet? I think the answer is apparent. But you might say, okay, that's interesting, but what does it have to do with me? The 21st century is the age of anxiety, and it affects us all, whether we know it or not. Everything's changing, and work-leisure boundaries are falling, and we are caught in the frenzy of the fast track of life with its uncertainty, self-doubt. A recent meta-study by Guo and his colleagues at the Guangxi Medical University collated 21 studies, empirical studies from 2000 to 2015 to see what the lifetime incidence of selective mutism, of anxiety disorders are in mainland China. And what they found, wait for it, the lifetime incidence of anxiety disorders in mainland China is 41%. That is a staggering number, 41% lifetime incidence of anxiety disorders. And they found social anxiety was at about 5 to 10%. Well, I hear you say, 5 to 10% social anxiety, that cannot be. I don't know anybody with social anxiety. Well, you do. You just don't know that you know them. People with social anxiety are not screaming for help, they are suffering in silence. Take a look around this room. According to those statistics, there must be about 30 people here suffering from social anxiety. But we don't see them unless we know how to look. And in fact, they themselves may not have quite been able to put their finger on why it is so hard for them to speak up in a group meeting, approach a new person, or make that phone call. So 5 to 10% social anxiety and close to zero awareness. That means no early detection, no assistance, no understanding. And the technology revolution has only made it worse. We all know how tempting and easy it is to retreat to our cell phones as opposed to confronting some kind of social activity that we would rather not be a part of. And the extreme of this is a new disease of our time, which is that mostly young people do not leave their rooms, and they lead a virtual, limited existence. In Chinese, this is called sheinan, and in Japanese, it's called hikikomori. And in Japan alone, it afflicts more than 1 million people. So, what is causing this anxiety overload? Well, I think that who we are, our nature, our genes, our tendencies, our temperament, we meet many different situations in our life, and they include family, school, work, friends, culture, and we all know how sometimes that's a clash. Who we are doesn't really match with what we have to contend with, and that can cause us to be overwhelmed and feel anxiety. Sensitive social anxiety sufferers, in David Dobbs' words, are fragile orchids, and they need just the right amount of light and just the right amount of water in order to grow and flourish. But when they get this hothouse environment, then they grow and bloom to be the most spectacularly beautiful flowers of all. So, how can we help mold a bit of a slightly gentler, kinder, less threatening environment for people with social anxiety and for ourselves, and at the same time build their resilience? Well, I think there are two stages for this, and the first is understanding and awareness. Hadming's teachers, known early on that he was suffering from a social anxiety disorder, they may have stopped that downward spiral from occurring and engaged him socially, and that might have made such a difference in Ming's life. Teachers have power, and as Spider-Man said, with great power comes great responsibility. Awareness and understanding can set people free. That unveiling itself is very therapeutic. Our most basic need is to be seen. So the teacher who notices the child who doesn't interact, or the parent or spouse who understand why their loved one can't sleep the entire night before a presentation. We can't see what we don't know. So, with awareness and understanding under our belts, what else can we do? Well, I think here you can, in a nutshell, you can divide what we can do into do's and don'ts. Do not pressurize somebody into doing things that for us seem trivial, but for them might just be too stressful. Like the teacher who insists that a child answers in class, or a boss who insists that an employee make a presentation. On the do side, do engage and help the sufferer slightly raise the level of the top of his comfort zone and take that journey with him into greater social competence and comfort. And this could be a teacher who, instead of ignoring the silent child, approaches them and builds a trusting relationship and perhaps takes them from gestures to speech. Or the boss, who instead of insisting that an employee presents live, could enable him to prepare a PowerPoint in his house and then bring it in and play it in the work meeting as a precursor of, or instead of, presenting live. So let's go back to Lan. Do you remember? We saw her earlier, 5-year-old Lan, who she was frozen in kindergarten, but at home she was a boisterous, chatty little girl. 6 months ago, Lan's teachers and parents received guidance, and they learnt how to take Lan step by tiny step to greater social interaction. And they, in fact, brought her from silence to speech. They used an array of tools, including listening to her recorded voice from home, bringing her voice into the kindergarten, and inviting the mum in to help Lan talk to the mum in kindergarten. And then the teacher just brought her gently from gestures to whispers to speech. And a wonderful metamorphosis took place. The curtain of anxiety pulled back. The relaxed Lan appeared in kindergarten, talking and playing with friends and answering the teacher. Lan, the orchid, had flowered. So This is my vision. Let us learn how selective mutism and social anxiety manifest, so that we can hear and ease those silent cries for help. I've seen so many people break those barriers, and a beautiful butterfly emerges from her confining chrysalis of anxiety and spreads her wings and flies off to a freer, happier life. This platform has taken you and me one step closer to helping those in need. Yes, social anxiety and selective mutism is not that far from us. There are some people in this very room right now who are contending with it today. So, let's see the invisible. Let's soothe their pain. And most importantly, let's hear and help those suffering in silence. Thank you.